You're listening to the Wise Women Podcast, Episode 10. I'm your host, Alisha Wilfert, founder of Yoke and Abundance, a creative leadership coaching business. This podcast is designed to inspire by introducing you to creative women living abundantly. I hope you'll savor Christina's words of wisdom as much as I have. Today's guest, Christina Brown, is someone I've met only in the last year, but felt instantly connected to. Christina is an entrepreneur, artist, mother, and wife, among many other things. She's a talented potter and has a unique style. Her retail shop, Moonbird Pottery, reflects the spiritual journey she's been on, and I have a hard time not taking the whole shop home with me anytime I visit. Christina is honest and vulnerable and real in this interview, and I'm very excited to share it with you. But first, a word from our sponsor. Emerge Skin Therapy is this month's sponsor. And if you've been listening along, you've already heard from a few very happy Emerge clients. I wanted to bring Azalea, the owner, on. Here's what she had to say. Azalea, what do you want most for your clients?
I want our clients to be happy with the overall appearance of their skin and to feel relaxed and rejuvenated. But what I want most is for our clients to feel an overall sense of connection. I want them to feel seen and heard by our skincare therapist, and I want them to leave with a deeper connection to their own skincare and self-care needs.
Visit emergeskin.therapy.com and mention the Yoke and Abundance Wise Woman Podcast for 10% off your next service. Christina Brown.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here on the podcast. Would you mind sharing your age?
I will be 47 in just a couple of months.
Thank you. Now, before we were getting started, you were saying that you were a little bit nervous.
Yes.
Can you share with us about that?
Well, what we were just talking about when I shared that is I just find it really interesting how it is, it feels vulnerable and scary to share your own story, which I find should be the most personal and wonderful thing we tell people about ourselves. And it's also the most vulnerable, and it's scary to share. To be deep and put yourself out there and not worry what
absolutely.
People think when you share your story.
It's funny, the reason why I asked you about that is because so often I will send women the questionnaire and ask them if they'll be a wise woman, and I can't tell you how many times I've been declined because they don't think I've heard I'm not as good as the other women that are up there, or I don't know about this. And I do want to recognize the fact that it is vulnerable and it is scary to put yourself out there. And thank you so much for coming in and sitting down and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. You've had a really long journey of fun things in the entrepreneurial world and beyond. So you opened Just Be. Mm-hmm. You sold Just Be. Mm-hmm. Did you open Spring Garden Bakery?
Before I had Just Be, I bought Spring Garden Bakery from Matt and Ann Russ, who own Tate Street Coffee. So that was the first business. My husband and I were on a trip out west, and we were discussing it, and got married, had our honeymoon, and came back to owning a bakery.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was a little wild.
Were you afraid to jump in feet first like that? Or had you done anything? Had you thought about being an entrepreneur before that?
No, I was afraid to buy the bakery. My husband was not. He had a full-time job. He was fully encouraging me, you would be great at this. You should do this. Let's do it. And I cried, actually, when we were sitting by the pool talking about opening or buying the bakery. And I was like, I don't know. And then he kept encouraging me. And I'm so glad I did,
because it was the hardest of the businesses I've owned, because we had recently gotten married and I had to start going to work at 3 a.m. And so
are you a
it was
baker?
tough. I've always been a cook. I'm still a cook, but I learned to be a baker. I had never baked bread before.
Oh my goodness.
So I definitely leaned on the people that were there that moved in, and it was the best thing I ever did, because it really, I think, was the launch to me learning and then moving on from there.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was great.
What a journey. And I want to go a little bit deeper into your background and who you are and what you're up to. But I was wondering if you'd like an animal spirit card.
I would love one.
And I bought these animal spirit cards at your current business, actually, maybe
Awesome.
a year and a half ago. So Moonbird.
Yes.
Yep, at Moonbird. So I like to, I know that you pull cards on a regular basis, and you haven't pulled one yet today.
Correct.
I have a routine where I shuffle 3 times. Do you have a routine when you pull your cards for yourself?
I do. I overhand shuffle, and then I break them into 3 decks and restack them. Everybody has their own routine with the cards. I think that's great.
Well, I'm going to ask you to do whatever you need to do with these cards for it to feel right for you.
Awesome. Well, I like your shuffle, so I'm just going to break them into 3 decks.
So you've just made 3 decks.
And then I restack them.
Okay.
And the top card is my card. And I usually just put my hand on it and sit for a second.
Okay.
Usually ask for wisdom on my journey. The dolphin card.
Ooh, so dolphin is a creature of the water. So it's, and you know this, but for our listeners, it represents our emotional life, our creativity, our flow, which can be really beautiful and joyful. And they always say if there's too much water, though, there can be tears. Yeah. So the dolphin itself, and I always read, because I think Kim's words are really powerful.
I agree.
So the dolphin, innately intelligent, healer, light, blessings. The gift of the dolphin are beyond what our human minds can grasp. Dolphin personalities are often drawn to the healing arts, as they are sensitive to the subtle and enjoy working on the level of spirit. It is easy for dolphin types to underestimate the impact they make in the world. These creatures play such an important role in the wheel of karma that coming in contact with a dolphin type will change the entire course of your day and thus your life. This card can also indicate a profound blessing is on the way. When in balance, active healer, strong spiritual practice. When out of balance, underestimates own power to bring into balance like-minded spirits. How does that card land for you?
It's encouraging sitting here to do this interview and get that card. So it feels like I'm in the right place and with a like-minded spirit.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I feel like I've seen a lot of empaths get this card. Are you an empath?
I'm just coming to see myself as an empath in the past probably 6 months to a year.
How does that show up for you?
Wow. I tend to be really aware of my surroundings and what's going on, and tend to be really aware of people, mainly people, and just what's going on for people under the surface that they're not sharing.
Yeah.
I haven't leaned into that as much because I think I had a lot of personal work to do to come into seeing that as a part of myself. And so now I'm definitely leaning into that more and just as a part of my life.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background that we haven't touched on yet, that you'd like us to know, who you are and what you're up to in this world?
So let's see, family background. I've lived in Greensboro for when you add it up, you start thinking, wow, it's like over 30 years. So I've been in Greensboro for a long time. The South always. thinking about my history more recently as I've been just doing some personal work. I had a loving family and a challenging family that I grew up in. Definitely shaped me, which I think all our families do. So I am one of 3 children, and my sister and I are still in Greensboro, and my dad and my brother have both passed away. And I have been on a late blooming path of taking a long time to get out of college, and been on my journey to that, and that's a whole nother story we may tap into at some point. But as I just think about myself in the past year, I've started describing myself with a bunch of adjectives.
Ooh, I'd love to hear them.
So they probably will change as I get older and keep growing and keep digging. But I have been describing myself recently in this way. I am a partner, mother, friend, artist, creator, deep thinker, and wisdom seeker. I'm an entrepreneur, a romantic, a deep feeler. I'm a healer, a traveler, a dreamer, an insecure artist, a woman in her 40s coming home to herself, a creator of my own story. I'm a listener and sometimes too much of a talker, a woman in need of forgiveness and someone who forgives. I love other cultures and sacred ceremony. I find peace in stillness and community with women. And I've realized I love so much entering into communities in other countries with women. It's probably where I find the most peace and challenge and fulfillment. I'm in awe of life. I'm a daughter and a sister, a caregiver, a late bloomer, a mistake maker. I can be anxious and fearful, yet I've realized I am fully human, yet full of deep spirit and cared for and guided. And I love my family and my life. So that is how I've been thinking of myself lately.
I just kind of teared up listening to that. I think that's really powerful, and I especially love that you added mistake maker.
Yeah, learning to embrace that I'm a mistake maker and that being okay.
Because who isn't?
Right. It's not about being perfect. Like that was a little message I heard this week. That's not what the journey's about. It's not about getting to a perfection end.
Yeah. Last week you and I were having coffee, and you talked about how you feel like your life has kind of been in 3 stages. Mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
No. That has been a recent revolution for me. That I looked back. It starts with the beginning of the year. My word for the year was grounded, and part of that was letting go. So as I really have sat with that for a few months, I've come to this journey home to myself, and that's what I'm calling this phase right now of my life. So as I've really looked at what that means, I've started looking back at my youth in my family dynamic, which was difficult. It's hard to say that sometime about your family because they're all human too and they're loving on you. But there were real parts of it that were painful and difficult. And
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't mind. I had a very challenging brother who really kind of run the dynamics of our home. And we all kind of tiptoed around to make sure, just to keep the peace. And so in some ways, I had to sacrifice a lot of myself in keeping the peace. So and that's painful because I'm not, living who I truly am.
Right.
So as, I, grew up, went out to college, came home, like during that second phase, I had parts of who I really am, but then I had kind of created this person to live in the world that was accepted, and that kind of happened in my family dynamics, and it carried me into college and not so fabulous decision making because I didn't have a grounded sense of self.
Right.
And I've lived that way for a long time, and now that I'm like sitting back, like looking at my life, I can see where that was the most disconnected that I felt because I wasn't living truly as Christina. There were parts of me there, you know, and then there was this created protective piece, which I think is, you know, that's important too. I mean, we have those ways to protect ourselves, but now in this, I guess, third phase of life, I feel like I'm shedding that middle layer, that protective layer, and it's an incredibly vulnerable time, but it also feels really life-giving to start to say, who am I? What fits it all together to make the whole? And I think that journey is going to last for a really long time, but that's how I came up with my adjectives. Like I'm looking at who really am I? And so it feels like I'm coming into the whole, and it feels exciting and vulnerable and beautiful and confusing, and but it feels like mine.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest part of all of it for me. I feel like I'm living my life and telling my story to myself. Most of the time I don't have to tell everybody else I am today, but it feels powerful.
Yeah, that was something that really struck me from our conversation last week, is how you were talking about how even though it is vulnerable, it is a power stepping into yourself without the walls up, without this shell that we've been hiding in or behind.
Right, and without like a lot of the coping unhealthy things that I had as a part of my life, because I didn't have this grounded sense of self, you know, and acceptance of who I am. So
thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love that. And I know that you're also kind of stepping into a new phase of like spiritual practices or practices to come home to yourself. Can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite practices?
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. So I was raised in the South, traditional, you know, Southern church background. So I've always been in church, but not so much, I felt like, in sacred ceremony, which is a new phase for me. And I feel like I'm meeting spirit, divine, whatever anybody wants to call it, in all kinds of places for myself. And so really now, like meditation and things like that have been really new practices for me. Probably a lot of them began after I lost my brother, which was about 7 years ago. It was just a deeply grief-filled time, even though that was such a hard relationship. There was a lot of grief there, and I kind of went quiet for a while, and then also didn't handle that grief very well.
When you say that, can you talk about some of the things that for you didn't look like handling it well, or didn't feel like handling it well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my proudest moments. You know, when I lost my brother, I grieved more by like drinking a lot, which was a way just to not feel anything.
And numbing.
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, and I look back on that phase, I was very embarrassed by how I acted, you know, as a mother. You know, I mean, my kids were young, and my husband incredibly understanding, thank God I married him. But, and even when I talked to him about it, he goes, I don't remember it being like that. And I'm like, really? But I do, because I felt it, and I knew what I was doing, whether it was in excess or not, that I was hiding from something. And so that was a phase, and now I can look back on that, and I can honor it for what it was. And then when I lost my dad, totally different experience.
Because you'd learned.
I had totally learned, and it was a deeper grief with my father and being the caregiver. And I did go quiet, but I went to meditation, to journaling, two really sacred friendships that walked with me. People that would come over and just hold my hand. Like just the friends that you have that you know you're going to have forever, that come in when you need them. You never know. And so I think that really instilled this new practice. And I would say, just to, round it out, it would be a practice of stillness, whether that's like walking or meditation or reading or burning sage and Palo Santo. Like I have to do that every day, and so yeah, it would probably be a practice of stillness.
Something that you introduced me to last week, actually, was you light incense. It's a certain size and a certain kind, and once it's done, you're done with your writing for the morning. So you start at the beginning of your writing, and then that's how you know your writing's done. And I think that's so cool for a number of different reasons. I write every morning too, but normally I have my phone out to pay attention to the time, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to try the incense, because that will be 30 minutes, which is how long I write in the morning.
Awesome.
So thank you for sharing that practice. I think it's neat.
And I love that incense.
It smells really good. I burned it already.
That's wonderful. Oh.
Yeah. So you're an artist. Did you tell me you just started owning that? Or have you been owning that title for a while?
Probably in the last few years. I took some ownership of that.
But you've been a potter for a lot longer than a few years.
I know.
Okay, tell me about that. So how long have you been working with pottery, and why do you think it took you so long to be able to own that title?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's see. My daughter's 16, so I've been doing pottery probably since she was about 4 or 5. So that would be, 10 to 12 years.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm going to ponder this question deeper, but just at this moment, I would think that it probably, owning that I'm an artist, for me, is something that I value, and I think I'm beginning to value myself. So maybe me not owning that was not giving myself credit to be awesome sometimes, or whatever, just not, we don't toot our own horns. I was thinking about that recently, talking to some women. I'm like, why don't we get to say woohoo when something awesome has happened? Why do we have to hide that and push it down? No, we need to be like waving our flags sometime.
Yeah. And that's kind of what this is about, is wanting women to own what they're up to own who they are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, it is about being a light for others. If you fill up your own well, and if you own who you are and what you're doing, it's not just a candle, it's a torch for other women, and it inspires them. And then you have this whole tide of people behind you that have gained that confidence by seeing someone else walk that path first.
Yeah, and just imagine if everyone in the world was shining their light and felt good about who they are. Yeah. It would be amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I absolutely agree.
Yeah. You recently went up to, what's the name of that?
Penland.
Penland.
I did, folk art school.
And Penland is an oasis for folk artists, isn't it?
It is. It's so wonderful.
What did you learn while you were up there?
So I went for 2 weeks for a ceramic intensive with 2 of my favorite potters. And I had all these plans. I'm a planner, big time planner, which is a strength and sometimes can be a detriment. But I went there with big plans of, this is an idea I have, I want to execute this, I'm going to get some help. And I have not executed the idea. I did not create a body of work. I made 2 pieces that I brought home. But what I learned in some ways goes back to what you were saying about being an artist, was the day I was packing up my car, I started to cry walking to my car. I was like, why am I crying? But then that's when I realized, I was like, I'm not honoring myself as an artist and allowing myself to be in process and not have to work so hard to meet orders or demands, but maybe just go and be creative and just play and have fun with it. And my one of my ceramic teachers there kept telling me, because I was trying to make something and I was so frustrated, she goes, you've been doing it for one day, come on. And I would just laugh, and I look back at my journal from that trip and it was like, slow down, relax, enjoy the process. Like, it was all these things. I felt like for me, I just thought about art and thought about life, and it's a process.
Yes.
Being slow, relaxing. It's not going to happen in one day.
Right.
So that was more what that trip was about for me. Not what I planned.
Being an entrepreneur, do you find this, that being an entrepreneur and being an artist at the same time, it's this constant struggle between your doer, producer brain, the entrepreneur brain. It's like, do, execute. And then our artist is like, if you don't give me space, if you don't give me time, I can't do for you over here on the entrepreneur side because I haven't lived in my process.
Absolutely. I had that day yesterday. The do, and I didn't touch clay. And I thought about that when I got home. I was like, that's what I need. I need space and time and quiet to just make. But then you also have things you have to do. But finding that balance, it's difficult to do both.
How do you balance that? Because, I mean, you are such a creative force. And then at the same time, I mean, you're a businesswoman and an entrepreneur, and you're, running a really awesome business and a family. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's crazy sometimes. I'm just really trying to be more intentional with my time and listen to my body. Yesterday I was feeling a little intense, and I just had to stop for a minute and breathe and then go back to what I was doing. Just really trying to be intentional and give space for what I need and let things go.
Right.
So it's a journey.
Yeah.
And always a challenge because I'm doing multiple things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you're doing the work that you most want to be doing right now?
I feel like I am moving into doing the work that I want to most be doing. Yes.
Can you talk to us about that? What is it?
Yes. I recently launched a business kind of off of Moonbird Soulful Living, and it's called Retreats for Soulful Living, and global retreats around the world, bringing women together to connect, create art, connect with our own wisdom that we have inside, and be together in sacred space. And we're doing little small gatherings at the shop that are small versions of that, just bringing women together. And it's one of the most vulnerable things I've done lately to start doing those. But it has been one of the most life-giving things to be able to connect with women and step out and be vulnerable, because I continue to be blessed every time.
What is it about those sacred circles that feels so vulnerable, or creating them?
Leading them and trusting that I have something to offer, and not worrying about the outcome so much, and trusting that there is a divine force that is blanketed over all of us.
Yes.
And is the one giving to each person in the room. And it's not me. I'm just creating space for us to be together and just reminding myself of that.
Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like so many women will listen to you and think, okay, she's an artist, she's an entrepreneur, how many times over? I can't even count. Of course she's able to sit in circle and lead and hold space. But to recognize that even though you're doing it, it doesn't mean you're not scared.
Absolutely. Every time. Every time.
Yeah. And you're scared and you're doing it anyway.
And it gets easier each time. But I still get nervous.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because I think so many people think it has to be perfect, or I already have to know what I'm doing, or I already have to feel confident before I do it. And that's not how it works. The most beautiful things that we create come from us just saying, I don't know how to do this yet. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one of the spirit animal cards, the first time I led a circle at Moonbird, I felt very insecure when it was over. And the next morning I went back to the circle by myself, and I sat and I meditated, and I pulled a card, and I pulled the earthworm card.
Oh,
And it was about being new.
the beginner's mind.
Yes. And it just said, the beginner's mind sometimes has this wisdom that's powerful. Not sometimes, I would say it does.
Always.
Have this powerful wisdom that comes out, like a childlike almost.
Yeah.
And so that was just that affirmation. Keep on.
And I think that what it is for me with that beginner's mind is that I haven't put the layers of confidence in yet. And sometimes those layers of confidence cloud the knowing. It's like the beginner's mind is tapped into my inner being already. But sometimes once you get confident, it's like that clouds what's actually happening.
I can see that.
Yeah.
You have to really keep stepping back into that space.
Yes. Continually getting curious about what's happening in the moment.
Totally.
Like new. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing these really interesting women's circles, and you're doing them on the full moon and the new moon. Is that right? Can you share a little bit about what they are and what you're up to?
Yeah. So, learning about the full moon and the new moon, and manifesting what we want in our lives, and letting go of things. Feels like that's been my journey for the year until I put a date on it, like the new moon and the full moon.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is that it happens. It's on the calendar. There's a new moon and there's a full moon. It's this intentional time to meet together. And we have different women that come each time, but we've had this little core group of women that have been coming back, and it's been so wonderful to sit in circle. We have a little, meditation if anybody wants to share. We journal, and really we spend time in stillness and quiet, and we tap into our own wisdom.
Right.
And then we have a little community bowl where we write all our manifestations and we burn them together, or our letting goes, and it's been awesome to watch it grow.
Yes.
And to watch people come alive. Like, I'm watching it happen in 6 meetings.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing to me to be able to be in that sacred space. And it feels like, I call it sacred, and I was thinking about that today because I use that word a lot. And for me, I feel like anytime people are gathering together, being real, being vulnerable, trusting one another, and sharing their lives, that is sacred stuff.
Yes.
And I feel honored to be in a group like that with other women.
Yeah, the divine feminine is so powerful.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
If you could sit your high school or college self down and tell yourself something, what would you share?
So I know I keep going back to stillness, but it feels really powerful to me. And I would tell myself to take time for stillness. I would tell myself that doing that, I'm going to be able to connect to me.
Yes.
And hear my inner voice. I'm going to connect with guidance and wisdom beyond me.
Yes.
That's for me. And I'm going to know myself, know my story. And I feel like all of that gives strength to enter the world and be in the world and bring my gifts to the world. So I would tell myself to take time for stillness. I would also tell myself to have fun, not be so worried or heavy. I've done a lot of healing work with myself, but I also have a whole lot of fun.
Right.
And I would say, have fun. Don't worry so much. Cultivate deep friendships, maybe with 1, 2. If you have 5 friends, wow, you're blessed. But if it's just a little tiny handful, invest and enjoy. And I would say travel.
And you've done a lot of traveling.
I have.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the things that really has influenced my inner growth, because you're around different people, you end up in challenging situations. You get challenged to look back at yourself and see, like, how am I reacting here? And am I judging? What am I thinking about this culture or this situation or whatnot? And I've always come home from traveling feeling more fully alive.
I've had the same feeling with travel. Is there a motto or a piece of advice that you like to live by?
So I don't know if I have a motto. I do have a little quote that came to me when I was on a retreat a few years ago. I was just sitting quiet for an afternoon, and all of a sudden this whole little quote came in my head, and I wrote it down, and I've used it ever since when I start my meditations. And it's, beloved, beloved, be loved. Be in this day, be in this moment, and be loved. That is all. And I felt like that was specifically for me because I needed that in that time. Just be loved, be in the moment. You don't have to be anything.
Right.
You can just be, which my first store was just be. I'm like, okay.
I hear you.
I know. But so that's been, I'm just very proud of that.
Yeah.
That I hold that.
Thank you. Because you are an artist, are there days when you don't feel like creating?
Yes.
What do you do with that?
I just don't create. Some days I'm tired. Some days when I don't feel like creating, I don't create. Some days if I have to and I don't feel like it, I go in there, and usually a little bit of music, a little bit of incense, I get into it. But I'm giving myself more space not to push myself. The old me, I worked all the time. I was up till 2, 3 in the morning. My studio was at home. That was a big reason why I moved it. I constantly worked without connection to myself. And now I'm just trying to be in flow and listen.
Do you feel like that's maybe why it was difficult to call yourself an artist before?
Yeah, it really could have been, because it was, in some ways, felt like a production rather than a connection with spirit. And that's been, my prayer for myself, that my artwork that's coming out now is a connection to who I am, my journey, and my spirit.
I love that.
Thanks.
Do you practice yoga?
I enjoy yoga when I do it, but I don't have a daily practice.
Yeah. Well, your meditation is a yogic practice.
It is, and every time I do have a chance to go to yoga, I love it. And I'm like, I want to do this more often. And I think the big part of what I love about it is just sitting in meditation pose.
Yeah.
And connecting and being in a room of people doing that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And all the asana, the poses, all that was just created so that we could sit longer in meditation.
Really?
Yeah, that's all that is. It's just the asana is how do we heal the body in such a way that we can sit for longer periods of meditation. So it has nothing to do with how advanced your handstand is or whether or not you can get up into crow. It's how strong is your body, how healthy is your body so that you can sit.
That is awesome. I did not know that.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite yoga asana, or is your favorite the meditation?
You know, it may be the meditation. I don't know. I'm thinking, I guess this is like warrior pose, isn't it? I love that because it feels so powerful, like moving forward.
Yeah,
you know?
so I'm going to explain what you just did. So warrior is 1 foot forward in like a lunging position and bent almost at a 90-degree angle, and then one leg straight back. And then your arms straight out and your body is like shifting forward. And there's this place where they say, if you're reaching too far forward, you're too caught up in the future. And if you're reaching too far back, you're caught up in the past. And the challenge in that posture is to be smack dab in the middle, in that equanimity of being between the pull of the past and the tug of the future, but being in the now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that posture. I love warrior pose.
You know, the cool thing about that, because I didn't put that together, and I don't know if I've told you this, but the little symbol for my business, the moon bird,
Yes.
I painted that for the year after my dad had passed on plates. I had this whole series, and it came from my son teaching him how to draw birds, and I put it on a cup at Guilford College when I was taking a class, and I brought it home. I was like, I'm going to give him this cup. We've worked on this bird. And he saw it, and he said, Mom, it looks like a moon and a bird. It's a moon bird. So that was how the name of my business came. And I started painting this during that period.
Yes.
And I had an art show, and a woman came, and she said, have you ever seen the Sankofa bird of Ghana? And I was like, no. She goes, you have to look at this bird. It looks similar to your moon bird. So of course, right away, I'm like, getting my phone out. We're like looking it up. We're all around the table, like chatting. And it does. It looks similar. It's a bird with looking back at its tail, but the body is moving forward. But the bird's beak is open, and it has this little gem in it. And in their culture, the bird is revisiting the past in order to carry the gems of wisdom to share with future generations.
Oh my goodness.
And I was sitting there thinking, like, that's what I was doing that year, like looking at my story, looking at my history. And that's really what I've been doing. It doesn't happen overnight. It's been 6 years almost that I've been just taking those baby steps to looking at my past and what are the gems. But the bird's not flying. The bird is just slowly moving. And so it's interesting with the warrior pose and what you're talking about. I just see this, and then my little symbol. I just wanted to share that because I didn't even know that that was what that bird meant when I was painting something so similar.
Wow.
And that's just when I feel like the divine hand is on our lives.
The synchronicity.
Yeah. I just loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you live with abundance?
I feel like doing this is being abundant. Just being honest and vulnerable. I feel like that's living abundantly. I think, loving my family, loving my friends, living fully in who I'm meant to be in the world.
Right.
Is living abundantly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christina, thank you so much for doing this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
I hope you were inspired by Christina's words of wisdom. If you've enjoyed this podcast, head over to iTunes, give us a review, and then remember, sharing is caring. So please share this podcast with a friend. Think about who you know that could use a dose of inspiration and wisdom. When you share this podcast, it makes it possible for us to keep bringing wise words your way. Check out our website, yokeandabundance.com, for more words of wisdom, creativity tips, and information about my group and individual coaching programs. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Emerge Skin Therapy, and my wonderful editor and producer, Ira Sterling at Julia Sound Recordings. Remember, every one of us has wisdom within. Keep sharing your words of wisdom because you never know who you'll inspire.